Hey everybody, welcome to another video review. This is the Master Replicas Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker Elite Edition lightsaber. I'm very excited to be bringing this piece to you. When you try to collect something that's close to 20 years old, especially as rare as these, there's always, a little bit of a story to tell behind how each one of these is acquired. I'll share that with you. And then of course the main highlight is to simply go over the hilt itself and marvel at it, talk about its sort of, amazing construction, the aspects of it. So this is one of the foundational lightsabers of the Master Replicas lightsaber line. For those of you who are interested by the way that I think of such things, there are 25 unique hilts to collect in the series. Some of the differences between the hilts are very minor, but they do count. And of those 25, the Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker Elite Edition is, or has become, one of the most expensive and most desirable and most difficult to acquire. Of course, all these three things come together. If it's difficult to acquire and it's most desired, it's going to be one of the most expensive. I've been tracking this guy for the better part of a year, ever since I barely missed out on one on the rebelscum.com forums last year. Again, arrived at the game a little bit too late. And this sells basically consistently for $3,000 if it's reasonably complete in the box and in reasonably good condition. It doesn't even have to be mint. It will sell for a high value. Only 750 of these were made. And it was released in 2004 as a member of the Master Replicas Collector Society. So as with all of the Elite Editions, the other ones being the Luke Skywalker New Hope Elite Edition and the Obi-Wan Kenobi Elite Edition, these were only made available to Master Replicas Collector Society members. They would have first opportunity, and then I believe it was made available to the general public. Whether the general public ever actually got a chance to buy this is anyone's guess. So the reason that this is sort of unique is it creates quite the powerful pair, quite the amazing pair with its brother, the Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker version 2 Signature Edition. So the main difference, and you know that I will have another video comparing the two, because how cool is that? There's basically no video showcasing that. But basically, this is the so-called clean version of Luke's lightsaber in Return of the Jedi. And there's so many different versions of this. For the clean version, or the so-called version 1, by the Master Replicas nomenclature, they never call it version 1. It's just simply the Luke Skywalker Return of the Jedi Limited Edition, and then you have the Elite Edition. The implication, of course, with a version 2 is this is version 1. This is pristine, clean. It's as first built. And so, of course, between the Limited Edition and the Elite Edition, the difference is that the Elite Edition has much higher quality build, and we will explore that when we examine the certificate of authenticity, and it's much more limited in a sense. And so the elite edition is essentially the so-called, well, obviously elite, but it's kind of like the quote-unquote upgraded or ultimate edition of the clean version 1, okay? And Mark Hamill never signed this version. There's no signature version of this. There's just an elite edition. So if you're looking for the best version of that, then this is it. And then in contrast, the version 2, which is the the weathered version, used, that one is separated into a limited edition as well, limited edition version 2, and then of course the signature edition, which Mark Hamill did sign 700, not 700, Mark Hamill did sign 500 of those. So, based on the totality, if you just want a Luke Skywalker Return of the Jedi lightsaber hilt, it's not too terribly difficult to acquire one in that sense. You have well over 1,000, I forget the exact number, maybe 1,500 plus, to choose from the limited edition version 1. You have, of course, the 750 of the elite edition. And then for version 2, you have another 1,000 plus easily of the version 2, and then another 500 of the Mark Hamill signature version. So put together, there's a lot of these out there. You can even opt to get the Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker reveal version, where you can actually see the kyber crystal, the blade actually elongates from EFX. So there's a lot of different, again, versions, licensed replicas of Luke's lightsaber from Return of the Jedi. But if you want to get the cream of the crop, the best of the best, it becomes a much harder quest. You have to obtain the elite edition of version 1, and you also have to obtain the signature version of V2. And those are two of the most difficult pieces to acquire in the entire Master Replicas lightsaber line. So again, I missed out on quite a few of these over the years. Well, not over the years, but over the past few months, sorry. As unbelievable as it may be to imagine, I just started truly collecting these again back in January of 2023. But, the story behind this, which I couldn't even make up, is that, there's a gentleman in the United Kingdom who's liquidating his collection. He's original owner of most of the pieces from Master Replicas. He's kept them for well over, 18, 19, 20 years, and kept them in actually reasonably excellent shape. And now he's, moving on. And I had known about the elite edition for a while. So he kind of graciously let me know he was going to put it up for auction. And I waited for 10 days. And unfortunately, at the moment of truth, I was outbid. I sniped in the last 5 to 8 seconds, got beaten out by somebody who wanted it more than me. And so, that gentleman who's based in Chicago, actually did win the auction. So you can imagine I was pretty disappointed because there's not many leads on this. This is just not the sort of hilt that comes up for sale very often. At least for me. I mean, there are some out there who obviously are more well-connected, who's been in the game for much longer than me. I've only been in the game for 6 months after all. But for me, there wasn't really many leads after I lost that auction. So it's a little bit, obviously, sad about that. And so I went on to the two areas where I just knew there was a lot of collectors, and I just tried. I put up a want to buy post in the rebelscum.com forums, and then I put up a want to buy post on the Master Replicas Facebook page. And to my surprise, in less than 24 hours, I got one hit, and one hit alone from somebody off of Facebook, and he showed off this. It's in frankly pristine condition. There's like literally absolutely nothing wrong with the hilt itself, which you'll be able to see soon enough. And things kind of progressed pretty rapidly from there. I mean, the price point that he wanted was not really off of what the going rate was. And in reality, it was basically the same as I was willing to pay on the eBay auction that I lost. The difference is that this hilt has number is slightly higher, and it's actually, believe it or not, in slightly better condition. The one from the UK had a little tiny blemish on the emitter area, really nothing to speak of at all. This one is perfect. I mean, in every respect, I've looked at it very carefully, and the other one has a little bit of a little scratch or something on the acrylic case. And this one doesn't have any of that issue as well. The difference then also is that the other one belonged to a collector who was in the game from the very beginning with the Masters replicas. He was actually probably one of the original members of the Collector Society, and so they all actually had a low number version, and so this one is a much higher number. I think his was in the 300s. This one is obviously 727 out of 750. So those are the major highlights. And because my particular seller was actually in the United States, my version of the Elite Saber actually got to me before the gentleman in Chicago got his. He got his actually just today, and I got this one yesterday. So life is strange. This is a very, very difficult hilt to acquire. And for me to actually manage to get one after losing out on an auction that I kind of wanted to win for weeks, and then to actually get the lightsaber a day before the guy who actually beat me on the auction, is just, again, you can't really make this up. So that's the story behind how I even managed to get this hilt. I'm really, really grateful for the gentleman who decided to sell. As it turned out, he didn't even know he wanted to sell himself. I mean, if he's to be believed, I kind of asked him, hey, how come you decided to move this? Because he actually owns the version 2 Mark Hamill signature edition, and for me, the two of them was like a dream pair. But he just wanted to collect the signature versions of the 3 original trilogy Vaders and the original trilogy Lukes from New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. He saw this as something that was expendable, and he wanted to raise some money for some other purchases. And when he saw my want to buy post, it was just sort of like the right time at the right place. Everything clicked, and he decided, what, we're going to go for it, get a nice chunk of change with one transaction instead of trying to waste time and energy trying to sell a whole bunch of little ones. And we connected on Facebook, and the deal was made. So again, there was a lot of fortune and serendipity involved in that transaction being closed. So I'm just really, really happy, really, really grateful that somehow this actually happened, because I just don't know how else I was really going to get one. It could have been a while, just to tell the truth, because again, I just rarely ever see this thing out there. There were little tiny leads. There was maybe one in Singapore, but that one did not have the certificate of authenticity, which is sort of a big deal. And in Singapore, the humidity there is a little bit higher, so there's a bit more chance of rust and wear damage. We don't want the Elite Edition to turn into the version 2 after all. And even on Rebel Scum, that was over 6-7 months ago that somebody put one up, and that didn't work out. In terms of, for me at least, I missed that. There was one auction, eBay UK, months ago, also sold for about $3,200. So it would have been a so-called tough sledding, so to speak, if I had managed to get this one. But in any case, my quest for this is over, and I couldn't be happier with it. I'm going to be looking into this thing soon enough, but let's take the acrylic case off, as is my usual way of reviewing these. Of course, all of them have been polished with the brilliant eyes. We're going to put the background all the way back here, so you can admire it in its full glory. It's always a little bit tricky when I put the background, because when I turn it, it always hits that thing back there, so I have to be careful of that. It looks like this time I actually managed to clear it. Just move it back just a little bit. So we'll still keep on turning this around so you can see it in all its glory. This is stainless steel, so it is significantly heavier than the aluminum of the limited edition, and the the highlighted jewels or whatnot are actually real quartz versus plastic, so it's also much higher quality all throughout. You can definitely also feel the weight as well. Only 3 elite editions exist, all made available to the Masters Replicas Collectors Society. This one, Luke New Hope, and Obi-Wan Phantom Menace. Of the 3, this one is the most limited. They made 1,250 of the Obi-Wan elites, 1,000 of the Luke New Hope elites, but they only made 750 of the Return of the Jedis. So again, multiple reasons for why this would have so much value. There you go. So let's take a look at the certificate of authenticity right over here. This is again immaculately, perfect. And you can see again that this is the fold-out envelope, signifying that this was made much later in the life cycle of Master Replicas. And if we open it up, let's take a look at what we've got in front of us. So of course we have the certificate of authenticity. This is the limited warranty. This is missing, I think, some of the postcards and whatnot. By the way, this comes in its own special foam box, inside of which is a large microfiber cloth. All of the elite editions came like that. Of course, you see this in front of you already displayed, but they came complete. This is where the plaque for this is the aluminum plaque for the stand is in the bag. And then here it is. This is our certificate of authenticity in the classic Master Replicas heavy black paper with the gold embossed information, 2004. 19 years old, guys. Pretty amazing. So let's open this up. Again, you can see on the left-hand side the actual certificate of authenticity, Elite Edition, the Luke Skywalker Lightsaber, 2004 Collectors Society exclusive. I'm going to slowly scroll up so you can read this for yourself. Pretty specific, from Star Wars Return of the Jedi. Only 750 copies. And then the nice gold mark with the signatures of Howard Rothman and Skywalker. This is actually what I really wish to have seen for all of them, for all of the Master Replica certificate authenticities, even the limited editions. This sort of classy gold seal, the name and signatures of both the Master Replicas and Lucas licensing presidents and CEOs, and then kind of like a specific language that shows you that this certificate is for specifically the product, versus the more generic language in some of the later products, and the fact that those certificates just be given to anything, it can be describing anything. All right, here's the close-up. I'm going to just slowly scroll up so you can take the time to pause and read it. It's pretty funny. 19 years ago, they said that Master Replicas rolls out the red carpet for the Luke Skywalker Lightsaber Elite Edition, an absolute essential for any Star Wars enthusiast who aspires to build a world-class collection, which was pretty interesting, because this was written obviously way more than 20 years ago, and yet it holds true today. If you're trying to build a world-class collection, then this is indeed something that's essential to have. So here we go. This gives you sort of the background. This is the same information as the limited edition. So they're talking about how come there were different versions of it. Apparently the hero version was machined entirely from metal. Pretty interesting, because they actually talk about what would eventually become the reveal lightsaber from EFX. That there was actually a removable control panel on top of the control box, revealed the interior circuitry. Powers of small triangular LEDs on the side. It was never visible on screen. Hero version also had a small set screw near the emitter tip, which was used to secure a metal rod that serves as a placeholder. And then they digitally put in the energy beam. You can see that it was constructed from solid billets of Type 303 stainless steel. It's virtually immune to rust, discoloration, corrosion, and high temperatures. I can attest that as far as I see it, almost 20 years later, a lot of these Elite Edition Return of the Jedi's still look pretty damn good. Maybe very, very small imperfections like the one from the United Kingdom. But I mean, part of it's of course how well you take care of it, but I gotta give them props. I mean, it is pretty darn good. So how is this distinguished from the limited edition? They talk to you about the detailing, okay, whatever, exceptional quality materials. And yes, there is a unique number actually imprinted on each pommel. So there you go. Okay, a little bit bare bones. I mean, I thought they were going to talk a little bit more about the LED crystals and all this other business, but they didn't do that. They just basically said, you are one of the lucky 750. It's stainless steel, and then they talk about the number that was engraved on the pommel, which we're going to see in real time. So that's very nice. I'm going to put this back. So that certificate of authenticity is really, really important. Here's the plaque, like with any Master Replicas lightsaber. It's pretty generic. You can take a look, 2004 Collector Society, and the Elite Edition is 727 out of 750. So glad they went back to this, or I'm glad that, that we don't have to deal with the silly worldwide edition plaque numbers like we had to for the later ones where they decided not to put the actual worldwide edition. Something about the mirror for these Elite editions, the base is always glossy compared to the non-elites. This is specific only to the 3 Elite edition hilts. The mirror base is actually a bit heavier construction, made of gloss, so just a little bit nicer. But again, the mirror is the same crappy acrylic, with the acrylic mirror backing. Again, impossible to not have some sort of fine scratches on it from just the dust alone. Again, I'd like to remind you that if you can look at my review from early in the channel, but I did a Darth Sidious. That Darth Sidious was opened fresh from the factory, sealed in box. You open it, you remove the little light layer of foam over the mirror base, and already very, very tiny small scratches. And that's from essentially a mirror base that's never ever been even open to the air for some 20 years. So there are limitations. The mirror base is what it is, but the glossy base is absolutely still good. Looks very beautiful. All right, so this is the moment we've all been waiting for. I'm going to move this off to the side and out of the way, and then we're going to reverently, with gloved hands, lift the actual hilt. You can easily tell, by the way, the direction. Sometimes it always, by the way, amazes me how some collectors are lost by this. So anyways, since I have the opportunity, check this out. When you look at it from this direction here, there is going to be asymmetry. Even though the lightsaber will be in the middle of the display, the middle of the base, the legs actually are positioned back near the edge here, and it actually moves forward. So there's extra space here, and the extra space is where you're supposed to put the plaque. Some of the plaques are longer, sometimes there's 2 plaques, but they created this extra space for you to put the signature plaques. And so you are definitely meant to understand that this is the front, okay? There is asymmetry where the legs are positioned on the mirror base. And then finally, looking carefully at the legs, they usually try to customize the legs so that it holds the hilt perfectly in a nice level 180 degrees. Okay, so if it's like off and jutting up or leaning down, you simply have put it on wrong, okay? And in this case, of course, there's no T-track grips, and so there's no grooves to hold the T-track. This is a round cylinder, but here you can see that the neck of Luke's lightsaber here is very, very narrow. It's a narrow neck, and so the the acrylic leg on this side has a much smaller semicircle. So it's obvious that that's where you're supposed to rest the thin neck. You rest the larger cylinder back here, and you have it very nicely centered. Okay, so you have to pay attention to these things, but it's not too hard to figure out. But I can't tell you the number of YouTube videos where the reviewer just simply has the lightsaber placed not only incorrectly, but sometimes dangerously close to just basically toppling off of the legs. So let's lift up this hilt. So the first thing that I would feel, and this is something so unique to lightsaber collectors, is the handling of it. That's as much a pleasure as watching it. Is the weight of this thing. So for sure, this is stainless steel. It's quite heavy. You can feel the weight for obviously from this. At least I would say 5 pounds, maybe a bit more. Definitely there's a beautiful heft to it. And here again, you can see the control box. We'll move top to bottom. So over here, you can see the emitter. You can actually see my reflection in it. That's how shiny it is. I did polish it a little bit. You can see the green crystal in the center. This is where the screw would go on the working prop. And then you see the beautiful thin neck. I don't know whether this is zinc or brass, but it's beautifully plated, reflective. I'm gonna turn this around so you can see it's perfect in every way. You can hardly see any, there's no nicks or damage or scratches or anything like that. And then here again, you see the very small, and this is like perfectly symmetrical. See that? It's the same thickness each time. And I'll compare that to the version 2, which was way more weathered, and where this was actually damaged. You can see slivers of this, and they're not all perfectly the same. This is again kind of like the as first built version of Luke Skywalker's lightsaber in Return of the Jedi. Although I like to make a comment, like how did that make any sense? I mean, his lightsaber was so damn weathered and beaten up when you see the version 2. How could that possibly have been weathered so quickly if he built it so soon? I mean, I can understand Obi-Wan Kenobi's episode 3, Jedi Master lightsaber turning into the Obi-Wan Kenobi weathered lightsaber 20 plus years later in New Hope. I mean, that was 20 years of hard living on Tatooine. But how the heck did Luke Skywalker build something like this and then it turned into the version 2 in like literally weeks? I mean, that's how long they took before they went to rescue, Han Solo. So the timing is a little bit weird. I mean, you're meant to believe that Luke Skywalker had, progressed to that of a Jedi from the events of Empire Strikes Back to Return to the Jedi, but there just simply wouldn't have enough time for him to have gone back. Did he go back to get training by Yoda? Did he just train himself? I mean, what was he doing while Lando and Chewbacca was finding Han Solo? And what do they mean by find him? I mean, it's like, that Jabba, it's like Jabba the Hutt's not exactly hiding. You know exactly where Jabba's palace is. So what was going on? I mean, maybe it just took him that long to infiltrate, I guess the Jabba's gang or whatever. But in the meantime, what was Luke doing? And then he's so much more different and mature and self-assured in Return of the Jedi. But of course, in real life, that was because another couple of years had passed between the filming of the 2 movies. But in canon, I mean, Luke is like completely different from the person he was in Empire Strikes Back. And the question is like, how did that happen? Why did that happen? Was it just going to Cloud City and getting his butt kicked by Vader and losing his hand? All of a sudden, his training is now so far along. I mean, I don't know. Those are just kind of like nerd questions that come to mind that I ask about when I think about these things. So anyways, getting back to, again, this pristine handle, the way it's supposed to be. You can see that the LEDs are actually real crystal. You can see the screws that are inset over here, and the black buttons, and you can see here the control box with a strip here on both sides. And then this is the pommel, and this is the actual, their version of the D-ring, the triangular ring that you use to latch onto the hook and the belt. And then if we actually turn and you take a look here, you can again see my reflection, beautifully polished, 2004 Lucasfilm, 2004 Master Replicas, and at the bottom, Elite Edition. And this is the only Elite Edition that has this. It actually stamps the number out of 750 on the pommel. This is kind of like a callback to when Master Replicas, I think, was hoping to do this for all of their lightsabers before giving up on it. Who knows, maybe it was just too expensive. for the factory to do consistently. But they didn't do that, and they didn't even do that with the New Hope Elite Edition or the Obi-Wan. But for this one, they did go ahead and give that to us, which I think is really, really neat. And I wish they actually had done that for all of their future pieces. It would have given them that much more individuality. As it stands, it's a little bit difficult to talk about, like the individual sabers, because essentially they're all identical. For almost every single release, the limited edition was identical to the signature edition, which kind of sucks a little bit. I kind of feel like every signature edition should be almost a little bit elite in and of themselves, right? They should have slightly upgraded materials. This is another example of master replicas sort of like just splitting again the customer base. You're saying that the elite edition is elite because you use so much better materials, you give so much more attention to detail, blah, blah, blah. But then why don't you just give that extra attention to detail, spend that money to give it to the signature editions? I mean, you're charging a lot more for them. And don't they deserve that little extra? Like, why do you have to split it between signature edition and elite edition? As it stands, basically with only one exception, that a Mace Windu, every signature edition is identical to the limited edition. The only difference literally is the stamp on the side of the lightsaber, or most often on the pommel, where they just say signature edition, and that's literally it. Everything else is identical. So again, why didn't they just make the signature edition a little bit more elite? Instead, now they give you this elite version that's much better quality, but the signature edition then is still out there, So that's kind of my take on that. But yeah, I mean, this is of course a stunningly beautiful lightsaber. You can see that they spared no expense, and definitely, in terms of the lineage, this is up there with the signature edition, and not just any signature edition. This is up there with the highest and most desirable of the signature editions. So I hope you were able to somewhat appreciate the design and how beautiful this lightsaber is. I'm giving you a lot of nice close-ups. You can see me in the reflection of these guys. And again, the one thing I really can't show you, which I really wish I could, is just the weight of it in your hand is very, very satisfying. So let's get this back into position. We're gonna lay it here, and again, you can see that there is this little small groove, and it is absolutely just made for the neck. So we're gonna do that, and then we're gonna rotate a little bit so that the crystals can easily be seen. We'll put our plaque into position right here, and then we'll move this back a little bit. Pour it around a little bit more before we finally conclude this review. So yeah, in the line there aren't a lot of threes. 3 meaning it's gonna cost about $3K. If you want to get a completing box or one that's in good condition, not a lot of threes. And threes meaning consistently. You can't get a 3 just because you managed to catch some guy who's got more money than wits at the wrong time or the right time in his life or her life. You're talking about consistently selling for 3s, and normally they're all signature versions. Mace 3, Darth Vader New Hope dual signature, that's a 3. Luke Skywalker signature edition version 2, that's a 3 as well. And then you have the Jedi Luke Elite Edition, that's a 3. Maybe Obi-Wan as first build, maybe that's a 3. So there's only 5 of them that I think kind of justify the 3,000 mark and consistently and reliably sell in the 3K mark. When people get them in their collections, they don't often want to let it go. And so complete in-box versions of this in this condition is pretty hard to come by. I know that now that's joined my hilt collection. It's not going to be ever leaving it. And there you have it. So I'm going to take the background off. We're going to be putting on the acrylic case and ending the review pretty soon. So here we go. So, what can I say? This is it. Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker, Lightsaber Elite Edition, number 727 out of 750. I hope you enjoyed that review, a little bit of the history of it, a little bit of the story of the acquisition of it. You know, kind of also got a chance to admire the close-up of the materials and the base. Really, really nice. I plan to pair this and put this under my version 2 weathered. And so in the future, I will do a separate video, just sort of, you know, comparing and contrasting the two hilts. So, you know, you can kind of see what they're like. That's going to be a pretty interesting YouTube review. I don't think there is any review out there that actually, you know, shows both the Elite version 1 as well as the Signature Edition version 2. I think there's one out there. There's one or two out there of the Signature Edition version 2s, but I don't think there's really even any of the Elite Editions. I have to check, but I think that is such a rare piece. Hardly anyone has it on YouTube. I mean, of course, there's a couple of Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker limited editions. Now, there's a couple of videos out there, but I don't think any of the actual Elite one. So I'm looking forward to loading that up or uploading that. So there you have it. For those of you who are interested in Master Replicas lightsabers, a 20-year-old history. I probably have the largest collection of YouTube videos on it now, with the most in-depth kind of discussion and reviews showing off all of these hilts and sort of the lore behind them. So hopefully that's somewhat enjoyable to you guys. I talked about this being a foundational piece of the series, one of the hardest and one of the most desirable. And then I have another one to show off with its own story and history soon. So until then, do take care.